that you don't. I've done things that you won't. There's nothing like a trail of blood to find your way back home. I was waiting for my hearse. What came next was so much worse. It took a funeral to make me feel alive. Just open your eyes. Just open your eyes and see that life is beautiful. Will you swear on your life that no one will...
Welcome to Heroin Chronicles. My name is Jono. I'm a former heroin addict for over 10 years. Person with opiate use disorder, junkie, whatever you want to name it. Telling my stories from my addiction is something that I've wanted to do for a while. And so whether you have similar struggles and you're looking for inspiration, or you have a family member or a friend who suffers from addiction, or you're just looking to educate or entertain yourself, I hope you find this useful. So a little bit about myself. I first found out that I have an affinity for opiate painkillers from football injuries. First one I think was in elementary or middle school, and then in high school I had a couple shoulder surgeries, and I knew right then that I just loved the effects that painkillers gave me, whether it was the physical, numbing the pain, and then over time it started to help me with, emotional and mental pain. I was always able to kind of keep it under control because I had the obligations of school and football and things like that. And then about my senior year in college, things started to kind of go downhill. I started to buy Oxycontin on the streets. Then over the next several years, I experienced some of the worst consequences that you can experience from addiction. Deaths of best friends, the death of a fiance. I had a pretty severe overdose, was paralyzed from the knees down, had to learn how to walk again. Shortly after that, I was shot by a cop at a traffic stop.
At some point during the confrontation, there was a shot fired by the officer.
The officer shot the suspect in the leg.
Did 4 years in prison. And then in February of 2023, I had my left arm amputated. Doctors were throwing around words like necrosis and osteomyelitis, but it was an ugly scene. And I haven't used since April 4th of 2023, so after the amputation. But that's the last day I used. And I went to an inpatient treatment for a couple months, did outpatient for several months, and just overall trying to heal mentally, physically, spiritually. So I hope you find this useful or entertaining. For my first story, I'll be telling you how it all started. It started innocently enough, and over time it became pretty ugly. So to understand how it all started, you kind of have to go back a ways. I was always an athletic, sociable kid, pretty much excelled in every sport that I tried. But as I got older, I noticed that I started to gravitate towards the more physical sports. My favorites were ice hockey and football. I just loved the contact, I loved the physicality of it. I grew up idolizing big, tough, physical football players, guys that will literally
run through a motherfucker face.
People like Sean Taylor.
It is incomplete. He is just drilled.
Brian Urlacher.
Breeze dropped, and Urlacher unloads on the rookie Colston.
Steve Atwater.
Unbelievable!
Mike Allstott.
Allstott once again.
Brian Cushing.
You big fat You hear me?
The Refrigerator Perry.
For the Bears, he'll be the lead blocker. They give him the football, and Perry. Touchdown. William Perry spikes the football.
I loved watching Terrell Davis run the football, but even more than that, I was a huge fan of Emmitt Smith. I loved the way he cleared the ball, super physical. I almost always had his jersey on when I was a kid. I just loved the way he ran the ball. When I was in elementary school, I read his book called The Emmett Zone, and I was always fascinated by him talking about how he could see the hole before the ball was even snapped. My first football injury was in 6th grade. I broke my thumb just doing warm-up hits before a game. Thought I had jammed it. I played through the game, just wrapped it up real tight. Then when I took the tape off after the game, it was black and blue. It was a hairline fracture down the middle of my thumb. But I was at the age where my parents had to give me the painkillers, but I knew right then that I loved the feeling that it gave me. Not only did it take away the pain, but it just did something for me that I never let go of. Everything changed when I got to high school. I had played Pee Wee football with the same guys for several years, and we all got to high school together, and our Pee Wee football coach actually became the offensive coordinator at our high school, so we kind of hit the ground running, so to speak. Football was a real big, important part of my life. So in Colorado, at least at that time, you couldn't put on full pads and hit until a certain date of the year, and all the big schools, all the competitive schools, we would always go to an out-of-state football camp. And for my first 3 years in high school, it was the University of Wyoming's football camp. And as a freshman, they only invited 4 freshmen, 4 or 5, something like that. And I was one of the ones that they invited. We ended up not booking in time to get into the dorms. That was that head coach's last year. But we ended up all having to sleep in a trophy room at the University of Wyoming. So, I don't know, 50 guys all sharing one giant trophy room for 3-day practices. It wasn't pleasant, but I brought a little portable DVD player. This is before you could watch movies on phones or laptops, really. I brought a little portable DVD player, and we watched Varsity Blues probably like 20 times. It was by far my favorite movie, still is one of my favorite movies, but there's a specific scene in that movie that resonated with me that I kind of held on to for a while, and it kind of shaped my mindset.
Hey, Tweeter. Hey, man, you got any? My knee's killing me. Sweetness. 500 milligrams? How many can I have? Keep them. Like I'm more at home.
That scene kind of instilled in me this notion that doing things like that was okay and you can still be a great athlete. That was also about the time when I started to take football really serious. And ironically enough, the real start of my opiate addiction didn't even really start with opiates. It started with something else. One of my best friends at the time, he probably could have been a professional athlete if he didn't blow out his knee and then stop playing football our sophomore year. But our freshman year, he convinced me to do a cycle of steroids with him. It was this Mexican steroid called testosterone. I remember it was like this thick, almost clear liquid stuff that I would inject into alternating quads every other week. And what I didn't know about steroids at the time is that, yes, it does make your muscles grow faster and bigger, but it also doesn't leave you time for your ligaments and tendons to keep up. And one day I was in the weight room, I was by myself, doing incline dumbbell press. My shoulder got out too far out this way, lost the strength. Dumbbell came down, hit me in the face, but it popped my shoulder out of the socket and it popped back in real quick. And ever since then, it would happen sometimes 2-3 times a game. I would be in the game. If my arm got too far out this way, I would feel my shoulder pop out and pop back in. Like half of my body would go numb for a few minutes, but I just put up with it. And then after my sophomore year in high school, I went and got an MRI, found out it was all torn, labrum, rotator cuff, everything. So I had to get that surgery, and it was just a persistent thing. But after that surgery was my real first kind of overload of opiate painkillers that were given to me, that I administered to myself. And that was kind of when that addiction part of my brain, I think, realized that, like, oh, there's something about opiates that I really like. I was still really serious about football, but in the little amount of downtime I had, I remember asking friends who I knew had recent surgeries or injuries if they would sell me any of their leftover painkillers, things like that. It was definitely my preferred substance, but I wasn't able to do it very often because I had obligations like school and sports, things like that. It never really got out of control. I kind of used it as a way to kind of cope with the pain, physical pain, I guess. Looking back on that time, almost 20 years later now, I can make the connection between those shoulder surgeries and eventually falling into IV drug use. After each one of my shoulder surgeries, they would put a tube in my arm about that long that was hooked up to some kind of narcotic, morphine or something. And it had a little bulb that was attached to my sling that I could just press the bulb and it would go immediately into my bloodstream. And I think my brain kind of made the connection that, you know, this feeling that I love so much can be instantaneous. But I was nowhere near that point yet. But I think it made the connection in my brain at that time. My senior year in high school, my position coach approached me one day and asked me if I was interested in playing college football. And while I knew that I wanted to go to a big university, and I also knew that I didn't have the size to play football at a big university. You know, he was talking more like a D1 AA or a D2 school for me. And I stopped playing football when I went to college. I ended up going to Arizona State, and I had a good time. I joined a fraternity, Sigma Pi, met a lot of great people, but I just felt out of my element. It was the first time in my life, really, that I wasn't playing football while going to school. And I felt kind of lost, felt like I didn't really have a purpose. I was just trying to adjust to not only college life, but also my life as not being an athlete anymore. And it went on like that for a few years until one day I noticed one of my roommates. He was kind of showing signs of using opiates. You know, he'd be nodding out on the couch, whatever. And I asked him several times if that's what he was doing, and he kept denying it, which makes sense now. Until one day I approached him and I said, "Look, man, I'm not trying to like call you out or anything. I just would like some." And then that's when he kind of came clean. And it wasn't long after that when he and I were using Oxycontin almost on a daily basis. And then my junior year in college, my life started to crack a little bit back at home. I was back in Colorado for Christmas break my junior year, and I could tell things at home weren't going well between my father and mother. I could tell it was financial, but I didn't really want to get involved. One night I was about to head out to a house party, and as I was leaving, I saw my parents sitting in a room where usually is only reserved for like serious talks. And I could tell just from the vibe that it was serious, and it was more serious than usual. I could tell both of them were distraught. Again, didn't want to get involved, so ended up going to the party. About midnight or so, I checked my phone and I have a couple missed calls and a voicemail from my dad, so I stepped outside to check the voicemail, and it was my dad basically saying goodbye. He said, "I just wanted to hear your voice one last time," and immediately just kind of that stomach drop out feeling, and got in my car, sped home. It's a 3-car garage, 2-car on one side and a single on the other. And when I would be home, I would always use a single, so I raised my side of the garage, and all these exhaust fumes just start pouring out of the garage. So immediately I kind of had an idea what was going on, and I raised the 2-car garage door, and I saw my dad in the driver's seat of his car with the engine running, passed out. So I ran up, and my dad's a big guy. He's probably 6'2", 6'3". At that time, he was probably pushing 300 pounds. And I tossed him into the passenger seat like it was nothing. And I got into the driver's seat, pulled out of the driveway, started driving to the hospital. And as I was driving to the hospital, he starts to kind of wake up a little bit. And then I pulled over and we talked a little bit. He didn't want to go to the hospital. And that's pretty much where we left it. We never really talked about it much again after that. I feel like my family growing up was definitely the type of family that kind of sweeps stuff under the rug. My parents trusted my brother and I, maybe a little bit too much, honestly. But we always just kind of swept things like that under the rug, assuming that we would be all right. I didn't realize until years later how much of an impact that actually had on me. I didn't know it at the time, but I went back to school after Christmas break. It was my last semester of my junior year. And just as summer was about to come up, I got a phone call that one of my best friends I grew up with died of an overdose. Apparently, bunch of my friends from high school that didn't leave for college got into heroin, IV heroin, and his mom found him overdosed one night. So I actually had to come home early for his funeral. And 10 days later, I had scheduled a study abroad in Barcelona. So I went to the funeral, and it was tough. Probably my closest friend up to that point that I had witnessed their passing. And then 10 days later, I was off to my study abroad in Barcelona, and I started to notice that overall, I feel like I was probably okay, but there was 3, 4, maybe 5 nights where all my roommates were ready to go out for the night, and I just didn't have it in me. I stayed in my bed, turned off all the lights, and just watched TV on my laptop. And looking back on it now, I realized I was grieving. I was depressed. And that was, I think, when my brain made the connection for the first time that opiates not only help physical pain, but they also help mental and emotional pain. And I was in Spain, went across the street to the pharmacy. Codeine isn't really regulated over there. I got a bunch of codeine pills, and I think that was when I trained myself to use opiates anytime I was feeling down or bad, to make me feel better. I finished up my study abroad in Barcelona and then went back to school for my last semester in college, my senior year. And that was when I started to use Oxycontin a lot more frequently, and it started to become almost a daily habit. And at one point, I even told myself, you need to take a step back. You need to pump the brakes on this. And immediately within 24 hours, I got deathly sick. It felt like the worst flu I had ever had. So I felt like, hey, this is probably not a good day to quit this. So I went ahead and did some, and suddenly I wasn't sick anymore. And that was when I realized that I was physically dependent on this stuff. And so then that kind of started a years-long journey of trying to quit cold turkey, and then giving up 2 or 3 days in when the pain got too bad, and then trying to quit cold turkey and giving up when the pain got too bad. Then just before I graduated in 2010, one of my best friends from back home came out to visit me for a week or two, and we were doing oxys together. And one day, kind of abnormally, I wasn't able to get them, and he asked me just point blank, have you ever done heroin? And to me, there was still a difference at that time. And I immediately was like, no, I don't want to do that. He said it's not only the same exact thing, but it's also much cheaper, much easier to get. I didn't know how to get it, but he assured me if we drove downtown Phoenix, he would probably be able to spot somebody who could. And so we did, and sure enough, he did. And he was right. We smoked some heroin off a tinfoil, and it was more potent, much cheaper, much easier to get, and I never went back to Oxycontin again. I managed to graduate somehow, and after I moved back to Colorado, that same friend, he introduced me to some people that I could get heroin from in Colorado, and it kind of went on like that for a couple years, trying to give off the vibe of being a successful recent college graduate, starting my career, but I also graduated in 2010. There really weren't very many jobs. I got my BS in marketing, and there were a lot of companies advertising themselves as marketing companies when in fact they were actually just door-to-door sales jobs. Ended up taking one, and I was good at it, and it was also kind of perfect for my lifestyle. I could go and knock on a few doors and then go and sit in my car and get high and then go back to work. So I was able to kind of survive, I guess, like that for a short while. Then in 2012, one of my former high school friends, he kind of noticed that something was going on with me, and he brought it up to my parents. And so that was kind of the first time that I was forced to admit that something was going on. But obviously all they wanted to do was help. Up to that point, I was just denying and lying about everything. And my parents could tell something was up. I don't think they really knew exactly what it was. But after my friend went to them and kind of explained what he thought, we had a sit down, and we agreed that I would start seeing an addiction doctor. He put me on Suboxone, started seeing a therapist, everything like that. And my life did start to improve. The only problem was I didn't know anything about what recovery was, what working a program was, nothing like that. I was basically just a dry drunk. Anything that my psychiatrist or doctor would prescribe me, I would still abuse, you know. But as long as it wasn't opiates or heroin, I was still able to manage. I got a pretty good job in my field of study in marketing. I got a job at a ad firm here in Colorado, and my life was going well. I was making some decent money, and my life at that time felt like it was great. And then I fell in love. And that was the best feeling I've ever felt. Better than any of the numerous drugs that I've done. And I'll be telling that tragic story on the next episode. So if you're still watching, I just genuinely want to say thank you. And I'll leave you with this. It took me a long time to not only accept help, but to admit that I needed it. No matter what your reason for making your way to this video, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And asking for help or accepting help is not a sign of weakness. It's actually the exact opposite. Asking for help was one of the hardest, most difficult things I've ever done. And I never would have imagined the strength I gained from it.
I ain't no saint, but I ain't cruel. Mama raised a problem, not a fool. I might roll with